Hello, here we are again doing another one of our International Women's Day sessions. We're making it International Women's Month. So I'm interviewing women who inspire me, that I admire, in many cases, women that I love dearly, and that's no different today. I'm interviewing my friend Linda. Just as a reminder, the theme for International Women's Day this year is Inspire Inclusion, which is why I've decided to interview inspiring women. So Linda, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, I'm Linda Koski. I was born in a place which you may all know now through the movie Oppenheimer, Los Alamos, New Mexico. And then, as my parents have described themselves as gypsies, they moved back to South Africa where they met. And so I was raised in Cape Town, South Africa. And then I met and married my first husband. We went to London, England, and we lived there until we got divorced. And then I left and came back to the desert, um, back to Albuquerque, New Mexico,
Yeah, so he's well, did a full circle back to
just
you.
like the folks, except I'm not going back.
No, no. Yeah, I was gonna
Only
say
to
that's
visit.
not a typical New Mexico accent you have there. So for a New Mexico.
Correct. Correct. I've asked if I'm from Manchester, France, or Germany.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
all
I,
in the Northern
I
Hemisphere.
I get myself in trouble regularly trying to guess people's accents in the UK, right? And I'm like, I guessed the other day that a guy was Australian and he was like, I'm from Essex. And I was like, never mind. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that takes time.
it does, it does.
Mm.
Well, Lynn and we've been longtime friends. Years ago, a mutual friend introduced us and said, you should go to Leah's house for a Bible study. And I was like, yeah, you should. And so we met and became friends. She brought her sweet mom, and we've been friends ever since. I mean, I married her. I married her. I didn't marry her, but I married her. I mean, it didn't stick, but I don't think that's my fault.
Oh, absolutely. No, 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 no. You just launched us.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we've been friends for a really long time. Linda has been my traveling companion when I've moved. She's come to see me in my crazy homes. She knows my cats really well. So,
Mhm.
so we've been friends for a long time. But Linda has an incredibly interesting story, not only from moving around, but as a creative person who can sew like a fiend, who can create amazing teas, and who is very a good writer and has all these creative energies. Early in your career, you were a nurse. And so I'm curious how you ended up going from this crazy creative brain to something so sort of scientific and logical, how you ended up making
Mm.
that your journey.
And it's a very interesting question because thinking back, when I was equivalent to probably I would say um, elementary school in South Africa, they used to call it primary school. I loved art, drawing, and went to Saturday morning classes, private lessons, and just loved it. And of course, there I felt I was really nurtured, with professional advice because at school it wasn't that much. Apart from knitting and sewing, and of course, knitting wheel, that was just a holy experience, and we know it wasn't the sacred one. Um, so yeah, so I was doing that, and my friend at the time, we were at the same elementary school. She said, "Linda, I really hope you pursue art because you're really good at it." And then came the day when mid high school, we had to make subject choice. And in those days, to choose with and equivalent to like AP, American AP, but it was called higher grade. So they're tougher. And so when I ran this by my dad, he said, "No, you can't choose art as a subject," because that was one of them I wanted to do. He said, "Because when you leave school, you'll starve, you won't have a job, and and that was that traditional thinking." And so I just literally threw that out the window, um, and turned to scientific subjects. I chose biology, science, math, and believe it or not, typing, which, we need to record our notes. And of course, that was the one I got the highest grade in. But anyway, so I chose those subjects, and I wasn't begrudging to him for choosing that. I mean, I loved biology, science not so much, but the other friend that I had in high school, just before she left for another city, she told me that she was going to be a nurse. Excuse me. And so I looked into this, and that was it. I remember I was sitting in a public library and I was making inquiries into a career textbook, and then of course, and I was smitten. There was something about it. It just bit me, and that was it. I never looked back. I just threw myself into my studies, and just getting myself ready. And I got into nursing college in Cape Town, and that was it. And then I just thrived. It was almost like I was running on an adrenaline tank, and it just overflowed into my post-grad days when I went into adult ICU. I loved it. And there was a time when suddenly I could feel I'd run out of steam. I mean, the adrenaline had left, and then there was no steam, and I just was like, "There's something else going on here." And I was already signing up for community college courses. One of them was pattern cutting because I desperately wanted to have my own fitting trousers and skirts because I could never meet the Gap or H&M requirements. Um, but again, I had done just after leaving nursing, I'd done a dressmaking and pattern cutting course with a bonus check that they'd given us, the government gave at the time. So creativity's been there. I just professionally knew I'd be okay if I went into nursing.
Yeah.
And I was okay with it. I mean, I loved it. I loved the stories. I loved, piercing people's arteries to get a blood gas. I mean, it was crazy what I loved doing. Just don't do it to me. Um, but that was when, just looking back, that was when I realized, hang on, I cannot forget my creative side. I can earn this income, but I'm not going to forget my creative side.
No, that
Uh,
makes total sense. So along the way, you have really kind of used the tools that you had that you took into nursing, but then you really moved more into creative things. Like obviously, have had different roles, different jobs, but the writing you do, the entrepreneurial work you do, owning your own tea company, those things. How has the kind of wisdom you've acquired along the way fed it back into letting you be more creative?
when I left nursing in the paid role, I realized that I had to draw from transferable skills. So I went to the basics: time management, organization, um, financial. I didn't really have a managerial role to actually budget anything for the clinical setting, but it was there in the sense of the private hospital, where we had to record whatever stock we'd used. Um, but as I maybe it was also a place of, okay, I'm letting go of this journey, but I want to embrace more of this. I gave myself more time to talk with others, to read about, and then even attend certain things. Um, and so the strange thing is when I arrived in the States, I was still depending on my nursing background as for jobs, even though it wasn't in the full RN role. Um, Two things that actually sort of changed the trajectory of my life. One was when my mom got tongue cancer.
Mhm.
This was after we had immigrated her here. We had to take her back to South Africa for that care. And while I was there and when I left, I discovered the red espresso, the espresso ground rooibos.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, how can I have this every day? without bothering family and friends, and of course transferring funds and shipping, which was unreliable in South Africa. Um, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to just stuff my suitcase with bags and bags of these things, and then just figure that out. And then so once I got here, then I managed to read and inquire and find out that actually there was already a supplier in the US, and they said, get your tax ID and you're on your way. I was like, yes, I can have this every day. But my nature is to share. So I
Yeah,
love to share either what I know or what I love by food or a business. And the second thing that changed for me was when I met Dave. So he was my second husband. One day I was sitting in his apartment, and while he was in the kitchen, I think he was making a tea for us, I snuck his Writer's Digest magazine, because he subscribed to the hard copy. I sort of slid it across the table, and I was paging through it, and I came across one of those inserts, not just for subscription, but actually for ICL, which is the Institute for Children's Literature. So I kind of quickly tore that out and put the magazine back where it was, and sort of, stuff that in my handbag. And on there, they encourage you. And in those days, I mean, it's not that long ago, but still in those days, they suggested you write in to test your aptitude for writing for kids. And so I thought, I had nothing to lose, but there was something about doing that process that just filled me. I can only describe it as like a vibration. It was like some sort of cord was being pulled on me, and it was sending a vibration throughout me, and it just was invigorating. And so I sent that off. I heard back, and they said, you have the aptitude, please apply. We can't force you, but please apply. And I did. And that vibration continued whenever I did an assignment. Felt like a drug, which I've never actually had, at least pleasure drugs. And yeah, so those two things changed, um, or I should say, yes, basically pushed me forward away from depending on nursing,
right, right.
closing those filing cabinets, putting in my brain and say, right, this is actually where you want to go. And that changed my path.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, I mean, the reason I thought it was important to talk about is I think so often, we make a decision when we're young and say, I'm going to chase this career. And I think for some of us, we get sort of stuck in it and are like, I'm just going to keep doing that thing. And even if some other part of you is calling and saying, do something else, do something else, do something else, right? And I mean, I did something similar. I was an accountant and I didn't love it. And I got into product management and I fell in love with that job and with the creativity of it and of working with engineers. So I did it for 22 years, right? And then when I was done, I was done. Similar to you, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do it, right? So I started this coaching business. And so I want women to hear like this is like it is not your life is not one note. You don't only you're not only going to ever sing one note. Like you're going to try things and do them and say, that's not for me. I'm going to slide over here a bit. And sometimes it's going to be a major shift and sometimes it's going to be a little pivot, like a little movement, right?
Yeah,
But I think sometimes we get so intent on like succeeding in the thing we said we'd do that we don't give ourselves space to go, oh, let's just try a little something and see what it does. Right.
yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to mention that. I think there's a really important story and lesson in there for a lot of us. Um,
And if I can
yeah,
just
of
add
course.
to that, when I was in nursing in that private hospital, I actually nursed a 70-odd-year-old man who absolutely said the most influential thing, and I'll never forget it, as I'm about to relay. He started off as a physical therapist for 17 years. He left that and he became a clerk to a law firm. While he was there, we thought, okay, so he studied law, became a lawyer, excuse me, did that for just over, I think, almost 2 decades. He left and became a chicken farmer. And of all the things he did, when I met him, he said he loved the chicken farming. But the most profound thing he said to me was that even though I left physical therapy and eventually law, he said it didn't make me a failure for leaving those people, that profession, because he went on to do what he wanted to do. And so when I left England, my colleagues actually, some of them actually accused me of failing them and leaving them. And I was like, well, I have dreams to pursue.
Right.
And I never ever forgot that, man.
Yeah. I
So
love
yeah,
that. I love
it
that. And
doesn't
I
make you a failure for moving on.
No, of course not. And I think sometimes the failure for me would be to not do the thing that feels like the vibration, like the thing that would rise up in your body and say, "Ooh, chase me. I have something to offer," right? I think
Yeah.
that's huge. And I think you and I have talked about this too. I think we were talking about higher education just the other day and like in a personal conversation. And I said, my dad, when I was the wise old age of 27 and said, I'm thinking of going back to graduate school, but I'll be so old when I graduate. I was going to be 29. And he said, You're going to be 29 either way. Might as well get a degree if you want one. And I'll never forget that because then years later and during the pandemic, I got another degree that I was like, well, I'm gonna turn 47 either way. I might as well get this degree if I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
And so, but at the time, I wasn't that old. In my brain, though, I was like, I'm so much older than all my friends who already have master's degrees, right? Because they all went straight to postgrad and I didn't. But his perspective was just like, well, go do it if you want to do it. You're gonna get older if you're lucky, right?
Mhm.
So you might
Yeah,
as well do the thing you want to do. And I think
exactly.
sometimes we lose sight of like, take the opportunity. This life is short,
Mm.
which I know
Very.
young people are like, no, it's not. And I'm like, yeah, you'll feel that way. You'll feel different in a few years.
See
So
it in nursing how short it
yeah.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, lives were snuffed out. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the other, I think, really something that's going on for you that I think you can share with those who are listening is you're really in a caregiving season for your mom. And so I'm curious, you can share whatever you want, obviously, but I'm really curious about how has caregiving for someone with so much of your time and attention and love shown up and impacted you as an individual for good and bad, right? In terms of how has that shown up in your life?
Um, maybe I could divide it into two to simplify it because caregiving is not simple.
No, not at
Um,
all.
but I would probably say like maybe internal and externally.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe internally will be longer. So so externally, very interesting how my whole physical world had to change.
Hmm.
I was appreciative of living simply, small, um, uh, running out, doing things spontaneously, whether it was socially, I don't know, doing a course or whatever. Uh, just grabbing the moment and just running with it. Accepting invitations, whether that be just for dinner or a concert or even to visit family out of state. Um, that changed. And that was the beginning of learning to
Yeah.
let go of control, spontaneity, and then, of course, just ultimately selfish desire. And I appreciate that's quite a strong word for what is very natural to our existence, is to socialize and all that. So that would lead me into internally. It was a great battle. That the selfishness I would often describe to people, at first it was like a throbbing headache, and then it became to the point where I actually had to vomit it out and say, okay, this has to go, because if this is what it's like to raise small children and a baby and be a parent, then I need to do this with my parent who's now depending on me, almost like a vulnerable kid.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a battle.
Yeah.
It went on for, I mean, I suppose a roller coaster, but there was a point where I thought I was actually just going to run up into the base of the Santias and just hide under a bush. Um,
Yeah.
I think that was the key, uh, to opening the door to so much more. Because then it was like, okay, put that aside, and everything else that goes with my selfish desires or my choices, and say, okay, hang on. I have this time with my mom fortunately, our relationship has always been a sound one. I mean, it was only when she shouted in the entire pharmacy when I was 14, when I became a woman, that I
Mhm.
needed Dr. White's. That wasn't a good time. But after then, when I was overseas, I mean, let's be frank here. We all know about Dr. White's. Well, maybe some people aren't. Anyway, yeah, and so our relationship changed in my 20s when I was overseas because it came down to quality
Mhm.
of time when we had those minutes on those metered phone calls. So I wanted to continue that time in the relationship with her. Um, and then my parents didn't leave me in the street when I was a toddler.
Right.
They leave me to fend for myself. So for me, this is just the natural. So within this time, it completely forced me to be still and to slow down and to actually stop, um, to the point where um, letting go of what mom used to be able to do, which is part of grief. Okay, she can no longer do estate sales. Okay, we can no longer do drives to the monastery. We can no longer, um, excuse me, it came down to like, okay, let's go look at the sunset. So we
Mhm.
drive 15 minutes up the road. Um, oh, wow, look at the colors of the leaves. They're changing. Take her down to the river. Let's go um, 4x4 wheeling your wheelchair through, to see more of what we can
Oh,
like to see because it was close. But through that slowing down and stopping, it brought me to a place of looking within
yeah.
and deeper within. Um, Thankfully, through a counselor, through really good friends, um, and journaling, um, and being careful with who I talk to about my heartfelt issues.
Mhm.
Um, I came to a place of actually looking at where I was in my journey with my two marriages, personally, romantically, and then even professionally, like saying, okay, well, yes, you did that. What can you draw from it? What can you share in your writing? Um, and choosing more time for basically arriving at self care.
Yeah.
So, caring for myself more than probably I ever did
Mhm.
before, especially emotionally, um, physically, probably too. Um, so, it's brought me to a great place of um, almost of acceptance or like an arrival.
Mhm.
But the train hasn't fully docked. Like I'm still um, throwing out suitcases. Baggages
Totally.
or whatever, yeah. Um, but yeah, so I would say, and then through that, I mean, I've chosen not to date
Mhm.
um, the time, um, I mean, quite honestly, the emotional energy. Um, all I see is black bags of emotional garbage from their side, and then adding to mine, which I'm desperately trying to throw out first. And it just seems too much. But that's also because the time and the energy involved is I'd rather put it here,
Yeah, of course.
um,
Of course.
which is really at the end of the day going to be a very short
Yeah.
season. It's
Yeah.
not lifelong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think it's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking like, when I hear my friends who are parents of, mothers of small children, um, I think I think we have this idea, and other caregivers that I know, we have this idea in our minds that there's some sort of, you know, everyone is the Holy Virgin Mary, and they feel so grateful to be, mothering and parenting and taking care of everyone else and making sure everyone's, knickers are clean and all of these things, and changing the sheets. When really most women in those couple of scenarios are sometimes like, I want to run away and hide under a bush. But then the guilt, the sort of shame storm that follows it is so intense that we don't give each other the grace and we don't have this conversation. We don't say, yeah, sometimes I want to go hide under a bush and, I want to run away from home. right?
Yeah.
And I want, look, if I could get in my car, drive away, and leave the baby in the bassinet, I would. Or if I could leave, if I could just walk away. And the return back to real self-care, what you just described, is one of the solutions to saying, like, I will be compassionate with myself, I will take care of myself, I will be gentle with myself, right? Is how you keep from getting in the car and driving away, because you need every bit of resource you can in order to stay.
Absolutely. And my resources have been yoga, recently acupuncture, walking, Mr. B, or just, and I do a lot of walking at work, a counselor, journaling,
Yeah,
regular sleep patterns. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
you have to. You have to. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I do think that there are so many women. I mean, women do 3/4 of all care, unpaid care, and incredibly high, and but also all care for the elderly and those who need, who are our parents and grandparents. We're doing a lot of that care, and we don't talk about it. I mean, it's typical. We're carrying a load and not saying, "Hi, I need to talk about this." So I think it's important. I think this is something that there are women out there that are going to need to hear it.
Yeah.
My last question for you is, if you were giving younger Linda some advice, if you were telling her something that you think would be helpful to maybe some of the women who are listening today, what advice would you give your younger self?
Um, I thought of two things. Um, because when I was younger, I was so hung up about weight. And at
Mhm.
the end of the day, it's mass, it shifts. And what people are going to remember is not whether you bought a size 10 Gap jeans, but actually how you made them feel.
Yeah,
And that's because that's what I've taken away, is how people make me feel, particularly during the season, even though they don't know really what's going on, the ins and outs. And the second thing, which is more recent, that I've discovered in a book, um, is don't try and be perfect at everything, particularly while you're at school.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, trying to be perfect in everything means you're trying to be people pleasing. And pleasing everyone means you land up denying yourself, putting time and energy into what you really are passionate about
right.
and that you can take from school and grow with it.
Yeah, I love that.
Um, it's
Yeah,
taken me decades to arrive at that, but
it's true.
better than 6 feet in the ground. I
Right?
didn't
Good.
realize.
Earned it. Good job. Right. No, and I mean, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things I see as a coach regularly is how often I am given the opportunity by these lovely people to say, it feels like what you just described is an act of self-betrayal. And then they're like, yes, I have betrayed myself. And it's like, okay. And they don't know to call it that until they're in the midst of it. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you choose yourself next time? Right? What does it look like? But it's so ingrained in us to please, to please, to please, to please,
Very
right?
true.
That I
Yeah.
think it can be so good to have somebody say, is that what you want? I think I regularly say to my clients, like, what do you want? Just like that. And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, me either. We have to figure that out.
Yeah.
You need to know what you want. But we
Yeah.
get so far from it that sometimes it's hard to, like, find the nugget of what is it that I want. Right.
So fun. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you for letting me interview you. I
Oh,
appreciate
it
it.
was an absolute joy. It was a wonderful time of reflection and yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
thanks.
Yeah. If you're watching this video, you will notice that in the corner there is a little QR code where you can donate to the Malala Fund. That is what, if you have any desire to donate, we are donating to Malala Fund because that particular trust makes sure to focus on the education of women and girls, often in places where they have traditionally not had great education or any education, but also women and girls in more developed areas where that want access to STEM or medicine or legal or other areas that they want growth and opportunity in. So when we're all done at the end of this month, a big donation will go to the Malala Fund for any of you who want to donate. So take a picture of the QR code and make it happen. So Linda, thank you again.
Thank you.
And we
Wow,
will
the curtsy.
we will continue the series tomorrow, everyone.